In this video, I want to talk to you about dealing with distributive negotiation tactics. Now, if you haven't watched our prior video on what are distributive negotiation practices, please do so. Okay, but with that being said, we want to identify some of the means of dealing with those, addressing the scenario when the other party pursues a very competitive, aggressive, distributive type tactic in a negotiation. How do you respond to that? So there are innumerable ways you can respond to that, obviously, but some that have been identified through prior research and practice as being effective are the following. First, dialogue. If the other person seems very aggressive, right, they're using some sort of tactic to hurry things along or to create intimidation in you or to simply beat up on you with information, is to simply continue the dialogue. Do your best not to be affected by it. Continue to ask questions about the scenario. Even if they take a competitive position, continue the conversation. Ask them to explain the position. Ask them to look at the position in a different way. Ask them to give you additional information or facts related to it, that type of thing. Ultimately, it turns it into a communication-based scenario rather than being subjected to a barrage of whatever is included in the distributive tactic used by the other party. Okay. Another thing is to simply ignore it, to simply act as if it's not happening, right? To simply proceed in reacting to the other side as if there has not been a very competitive tactic used. One scenario in which this is extremely useful is when a party draws a line in the sand, right, and says, I'm not paying any more than this, right? This is a very positional tactic, right? I'm not paying more than this. This is all I'm going to pay, okay? Or I'm not doing more than this in no scenario. To simply ignore it, to simply continue on in the conversation as if they didn't say it. Now, if you acknowledge that line in the sand, if you acknowledge it, it makes it real. And it makes them feel as if they're defeated if they have to go back on it, right? And they won't, oftentimes for that reason. It creates an emotional element that you don't want to introduce. You want to keep logic there. Simply continue to discuss the scenario, continue to and ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to say, so in a scenario, so if we were to do A, B, and C, and it may be, right, once again, passing the line that they drew in the sand, but you don't make it seem like you even acknowledge that line in the sand, right? You went by it in a way that seems like you worked by it together, right? Because you continued the conversation, you continued the dialogue, you ignored the distributive tactic, okay? That can allow them to save face and can allow it to not become a blockade for continuing in the negotiation. All right. Another way is to respond in kind. Oftentimes, highly competitive people, highly aggressive people are subdued or only respond well if the person fights back in the exact same way. So you respond in kind. You be aggressive. You use extremely competitive tactics back against them in order to achieve whatever objectives you're going for, right? So again, that's the next scenario. And lastly, you co-opt the other party, all right? You assume a we-based situation or position, right? You use tactics that try to bring them around to your way of thinking. Oftentimes it means introducing more facts. It oftentimes using logic, using emotion, things like that to try to get them around to your position. Once again, one of the strongest tactics is using a we-based mentality. That is, we're not competing here. We're just working out together a situation where there's an asset at stake, right? It's not that we're fighting over it. We're just arranging a scenario. We need to work together to solve our situation, to arrange it to the best interest that we both can, right? That type of thing. So once again, you're trying to bring the party around to your side, around to your way of thinking. Oftentimes this could be done by simply shaking up what they perceive as being the context, the value, the nature of the negotiation, right? That type of thing. You can try to convince them with logic. You can try to add emotion. You can try to confuse them in a way, or just simply change their perception about something. All of these things taken together can be effective methods for dealing with distributive negotiation tactics.